It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a romantic getaway to Italy, a chance to escape the grind and reconnect with the man I married. Instead, it turned into the moment everything changed. We landed in Rome on a crisp spring morning, the city buzzing with life, history, and promise. My husband, Jason, was unusually quiet, his usual charm replaced by a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. I brushed it off, telling myself maybe he was just stressed from work or travel, but as the days passed, the tension grew. Our itinerary, carefully planned, began to unravel. Flights were missed, reservations lost, and every minor inconvenience seemed to chip away at the facade of the perfect vacation. Then came the day we were supposed to visit a small town in Tuscany, a place Jason had insisted was magical and just the kind of peaceful spot we needed. We arrived late afternoon, the sun casting golden light over cobblestone streets and rustic vineyards. It should have been idyllic. Instead, it felt like a trap. Jason announced he needed to take care of something and left me standing with our bags near the town square. His parting words were a smirk and, "Don't worry, I'll be back." Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, the town's charm faded into isolation. I was stranded, alone, in a place where I didn't speak the language, without a phone signal, and with a husband who seemed to think it was all a joke. Panic clawed at my chest, but beneath it burned a quiet ember of defiance. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, not this time. If he thought leaving me stranded was funny, he was about to learn just how serious I could be. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into power, loneliness into strength, and a small town in Italy into the setting of my comeback. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the narrow streets of that quaint Tuscan town, the weight of Jason's absence settled heavily on me. The initial shock of being left alone had morphed into a knot of fear and anger swirling inside, but amidst it all, a stubborn spark of resolve flickered to life. I wasn't going to be the abandoned wife, stranded in a foreign land, waiting for a man who seemed to think it was all a game. I pulled my coat tighter around me, grasped our bags, and began to walk. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional murmur of locals closing their shops and the distant laughter of families gathering for dinner. The language barrier was real. Italian words flew over my head, but determination was universal. I found a small cafe, still open, and stepped inside, hoping for warmth, a way to reach someone who could help. The owner, a kind elderly woman named Rosa, smiled warmly, despite the obvious confusion in my eyes and gestures. She served me a hot espresso and, with broken English and animated hands, helped me find a public phone. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number for our embassy, struggling to explain my predicament through the language gap and shaky voice. They promised to send assistance and advised me to stay safe and visible until help arrived. For hours, I sat in that cafe, drinking espresso and listening to the comforting murmur of the town's evening life. I thought about Jason, why he'd done this, what it meant for us, and I realized something profound. This wasn't just a cruel joke or a careless act. It was a wake-up call, a moment that stripped away the illusions and forced me to look clearly at my life and my worth. I wasn't powerless. I was stranded, yes, but I was also resourceful, strong, and fiercely determined. The next day, I began to explore the town not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her agency. I met locals who, despite the language barrier, shared stories, laughter, and kindness. I learned to navigate the cobbled streets, discovered hidden shops, and even found a small library where I picked up a phrase book. I sent messages through a borrowed phone, reached out to friends and family, and started to rebuild my network. Word spread quickly among the townspeople about the stranded traveler with the determined spirit, and soon offers of help came in, from a bakery owner offering pastries to a taxi driver ready to take me anywhere I needed. Meanwhile, Jason's calls went unanswered. I chose silence as my answer, a quiet refusal to engage with someone who thought abandoning me was acceptable. Instead, I focused on the growing power within me, the realization that I could face this alone and come out stronger. This wasn't just survival, it was transformation, and it was only the beginning. The third morning in that small Tuscan town brought with it a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The initial shock of Jason's betrayal had given way to a burgeoning sense of independence and empowerment that surprised even me. I woke early, the golden light filtering through the shutters of my modest room, and for the first time I felt less like a stranded wife and more like a traveler on her own terms. After a quick breakfast of fresh bread and honey from the cafe downstairs, I set out to explore the town with a new sense of purpose. Each step on the ancient cobblestones felt like a step away from my old life and toward something unknown but promising. I wandered into the marketplace, where vibrant stalls overflowed with fruits, cheeses, and handcrafted goods. Though I struggled with Italian, smiles and gestures bridged the gap. A vendor handed me a sample of pecorino cheese, nodding encouragingly when I attempted to pronounce its name. The townspeople's warmth was a stark contrast to the coldness I'd felt from Jason and his family back home. That afternoon, I found myself at the local library, a charming stone building filled with shelves of books in it. I picked up a phrasebook, determined to learn enough language to navigate this place, and maybe to reclaim control over my own story. As I flipped through the pages, I scribbled notes and practiced phrases under my breath, laughing quietly when I stumbled over the words. It was liberating to learn, to grow, and to connect in ways I hadn't anticipated. Communication remained a challenge, but technology became my lifeline. Using the free Wi-Fi at a nearby cafe, I sent messages to friends, explaining my situation without revealing too much of my frustration or hurt. Their quick responses were a balm. Words of encouragement, offers to call the airline, and promises to help from afar. Meanwhile, the embassy had assured me they were coordinating assistance, but bureaucracy moved slowly. I realized I had to rely on my own strength and the kindness of strangers for the immediate future. The turning point came when I met Luca, a local artist who spoke some English and had a gentle manner that put me at ease. He offered to show me around the town, introducing me to hidden gems. The ancient fountain, the hilltop vineyard, and a small chapel where locals gathered each Sunday. With Luca's help, I began to see the beauty in this unexpected detour, the possibility of new beginnings beyond betrayal. At night, I sat on the balcony of my rented room, looking out over terracotta roofs and distant hills bathed in moonlight. I thought of Jason, alone in his world, and felt a strange mixture of sorrow and resolve. He had left me stranded, yes, but I was finding my way back, not to him, not to the life I thought I wanted, but to myself. I knew this journey was far from over. There would be difficult conversations, hard choices, and perhaps heartbreak still to come. But I was ready to face whatever lay ahead with courage, grace, and the fierce determination that had carried me through the darkest hours. And so, in that quiet moment, surrounded by the ancient stones and whispered prayers of a small Italian town, I made a vow to never let anyone else hold the power to leave me stranded again. As the days turned into a week, my unexpected stay in the Tuscan town transformed from a nightmare into a crucible of personal growth. Each morning I woke with a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the determination not to let Jason's abandonment define me. The initial fear and uncertainty were giving way to quiet confidence. My routine settled into a rhythm: morning walks through sunlit vineyards, afternoons spent at the cafe practicing Italian phrases, and evenings journaling the experiences that were reshaping my soul. The community around me, though small and seemingly worlds away from my former life, embraced me with unexpected warmth. Rosa, the cafe owner, became a friend and mentor, offering advice, encouragement, and the occasional home-cooked meal. She shared stories of resilience from her own life, how she'd overcome hardship and found strength in community and self-belief. Her kindness reminded me that even in the most foreign places, humanity's threads are the same. Luca continued to be my guide, patiently helping me navigate language barriers and local customs. Together we explored hidden corners of the town, the ancient olive groves, the artisan workshops, and a centuries-old church where I found solace in the quiet beauty and the gentle hum of prayers. One afternoon, Luca introduced me to a group of local women who gathered weekly to share crafts and stories. Invited into their circle, I found myself sharing pieces of my own story, the pain of betrayal softened by the genuine connections forming around me. Their acceptance and empathy nurtured a healing I hadn't expected. Meanwhile, I kept the lines of communication open with friends and family back home, their voices anchors amid the uncertainty. They helped coordinate the logistics of my delayed return, rescheduling flights, liaising with embassies, and offering moral support. Yet, despite their help, the reality settled in that I was responsible for reclaiming my life, no matter how far from home I was. Financial worries loomed large. Jason's sudden disappearance had left our finances tangled, bills unpaid and debts mounting. I juggled expenses carefully, budgeting every euro, taking on freelance work online to keep the lights on and food on the table. The stress was relentless, but so was my resolve. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of pink and purple, I sat on the balcony with my journal, reflecting on the transformation I'd undergone. I was no longer the woman who had boarded that plane expecting a romantic escape. I was someone who had faced abandonment, isolation, and uncertainty, and found strength, resilience, and self-worth in the process. The journey ahead was still uncertain. I knew the eventual confrontation with Jason would be difficult. There would be questions of trust, forgiveness, and the future of our marriage. But I also knew that whatever happened, I had already won the most important battle. The battle to reclaim myself. In the heart of that small Italian town, far from the life I thought I had, I found a truth that no betrayal could take away. I was stronger than I knew. The days rolled on in the Tuscan town, each one deepening the layers of my unexpected journey, one of pain, growth, and ultimately, empowerment. What began as a cruel abandonment was now becoming a defining chapter of my life, a crucible that tested me in ways I never imagined but also revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Every morning I woke early to the soft chirping of birds and the warm glow of sunlight spilling through the shutter. The air was fragrant with blooming flowers and fresh bread from the bakery downstairs. I'd start with a brisk walk through the vineyards, the rolling hills stretching out like an endless sea of green, reminding me that life, much like the vines, was resilient and capable of renewal. The simple routines grounded me. Breakfast at the cafe with Rosa, the kind woman who had become my confidant, was a comforting ritual. Her gentle encouragement and stories of overcoming her own hardships made me feel less alone. I learned to order in Italian, practice my phrases with patience, and even laugh at my mistakes. Luca's companionship was a balm. His quiet strength and kindness helped me navigate the unfamiliar, both the town and my own swirling emotions. He didn't rush me, didn't pry too deeply. Instead, he offered friendship, a steady presence amid the chaos. He introduced me to local traditions, like the weekly market where farmers sold fresh produce, and the small trattoria where I discovered the joy of simple, authentic food. Despite the beauty around me, the shadow of Jason's betrayal lingered. I often found myself alone on the balcony at night, the cool breeze a stark contrast to the fire burning within. I wrote in my journal, pouring out my fears, hopes, and plans for the future. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. There were conversations to be had, decisions to make, and wounds to heal. But I also knew I was no longer the woman who waited passively for rescue. I was becoming my own savior. Communication with the outside world remained a lifeline. Friends and family sent messages of support, and I kept them updated, careful not to let despair take hold. I researched flights, navigated bureaucracy, and prepared for the inevitable return home, not as a victim, but as someone transformed. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby village, I stumbled upon an old bookshop. Inside, the scent of aging paper and leather-bound volumes was intoxicating. I picked up a copy of a book on women's resilience and empowerment, its worn cover promising wisdom and strength. It became my companion, its pages a mirror to my own journey. Slowly, I began to see my experience not as a setback, but as a powerful story of survival and growth. As the week drew to a close, I felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve. I was ready to face Jason, to demand accountability, and to assert the boundaries necessary for my dignity and well-being. But I was also ready to move forward, whether that meant rebuilding our relationship or forging a new path alone. The small town that had once felt like a cage had become a sanctuary. It had given me space to heal, to learn, and to reclaim myself. And as I packed my bags for the journey home, I carried with me not just memories of betrayal, but a newfound sense of strength, clarity, and hope. Returning home from that small town in Italy was nothing short of a revelation. The woman who stepped off the plane was not the same one who had boarded weeks before, hopeful for a romantic escape but blindsided by abandonment. I returned with a hardened resolve, a clarity born from solitude and self-discovery that left no room for denial or complacency. The reunion with Jason was, unsurprisingly, tense. He greeted me with a mix of surprise and defensiveness, clearly unprepared for the transformation I'd undergone. I didn't offer explanations or apologies. Instead, I set boundaries, firm and clear, that would define the terms of any future interaction. The days that followed were a careful negotiation between past hurts and future possibilities, between rebuilding trust and protecting my own heart. I focused on Max, whose well-being was my compass through the storm. His questions were honest and sometimes painful. "Why did Daddy leave me there?" he asked one night, his voice trembling. "Because sometimes adults make mistakes," I answered gently, "but that doesn't mean they stop loving you." I made sure Max knew he was not alone, that I was here, always, fighting for him and for our family. Professionally, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. The Italian experience had ignited a fire in me, not just to succeed, but to own my narrative and my power. I took on new projects, networked with determination, and rediscovered passions I'd set aside. The financial strain left by Jason's actions was a heavy burden, but one I carried with dignity. I sought help where needed, negotiated with creditors, and found strength in managing adversity. It wasn't easy, but every payment made was a step toward reclaiming control. Legal battles loomed on the horizon as I engaged with attorneys to protect my rights and Max's future. Michelle, my trusted lawyer, was a beacon of support, guiding me through the complex maze of custody arrangements, asset division, and protective orders. With her help, I built a foundation for a life free from fear and full of possibility. The emotional journey was no less challenging. Nights were often lonely, filled with memories and what-ifs. But I learned to lean into the discomfort, to find healing in honesty and self-compassion. I sought therapy, joined support groups, and slowly rebuilt my confidence and sense of self. One afternoon, as I watched Max playing in the park, I felt a profound gratitude. Not for the hardships, but for the resilience they had forged. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The road ahead remained uncertain, but I faced it with courage and hope. Jason and I had difficult conversations, sometimes heated, sometimes hopeful, but always honest. Boundaries were tested, trust was rebuilt, inch by inch, and forgiveness became a journey, not a destination. Through it all, I held on to the lessons of that small Italian town, the power of independence, the strength of community, and the unbreakable spirit that refused to be abandoned. The months following my return from Italy were a period of intense growth, not only for me, but for the fragile family we were trying to rebuild. Each day brought new challenges and new lessons, testing the limits of forgiveness, resilience, and trust. Mark, who had been distant and indifferent before, slowly began to show signs of genuine effort. His apologies became less rehearsed and more heartfelt, his actions speaking louder than words. He started attending counseling sessions both individually and with me, understanding that healing required more than just promises. It demanded commitment and change. Max, now older and wiser beyond his years, navigated this new dynamic with cautious optimism. Some days he was tentative, still carrying the weight of past disappointments. Other days, he blossomed, his laughter echoing through the house, his curiosity reignited, and his confidence restored. I watched him closely, knowing that his ability to forgive and trust again would shape not only his childhood, but his future relationships. Financial stability, while still a work in progress, improved with steady income and careful management. I took on additional projects, expanded my professional network, and invested in skills that allowed me to grow beyond the limitations I'd previously faced. Michelle's legal guidance was invaluable as we negotiated custody arrangements that prioritized Max's well-being, ensuring a balance that fostered love without toxicity. Socially, I rebuilt my circle of friends and allies, seeking out those who uplifted and supported me. These relationships became a lifeline during moments of doubt and exhaustion. One evening, during a quiet family dinner, Mark reached across the table and took my hand. His eyes, once clouded with guilt, now held a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "Thank you," he said, softly, "for not giving up on us." I squeezed his hand gently. "Thank you for starting to show up." That moment was a milestone, a fragile but significant step toward healing the wounds of the past. Yet I knew that true reconciliation wasn't a destination, but an ongoing process. Boundaries were still necessary, conversations still difficult, and the scars of betrayal would never fully fade. But hope had been rekindled, and with it, a vision of a future where trust and love could coexist. As I tucked Max into bed that night, his hand finding mine in the dark, I whispered a promise: to be his anchor, his protector, and his unwavering source of strength. The journey from abandonment to empowerment had been long and arduous, but it had revealed the depths of our resilience and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. If you're watching this, know that no matter how dark the night, dawn is possible. Your voice matters. Your story is not over. Share your experiences in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories of survival and strength. And remember, you are never alone on this path. The journey we embarked on after that fateful trip to Italy was far from a fairy tale, but it was real. And that made all the difference. In the months that followed, I learned that healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and often slower than you hope. Trust, once broken, is fragile, and forgiveness is less a single act than a daily choice. A quiet decision to try again, even when it hurts. Mark's efforts came in waves, sometimes faltering, sometimes surprising me with genuine sincerity that made me pause and reconsider. Throughout it all, I held tight to my boundaries, knowing that protecting myself and Max was the foundation we needed to rebuild our lives. We attended family therapy sessions where the air was thick with raw emotion. Conversations that opened old wounds but also allowed us to speak truths that had long been buried. Tears were shed, voices raised, and uncomfortable silences stretched between us. But slowly, those walls built by pain and betrayal began to crumble. In their place grew a cautious hope, a fragile belief that we might find a new way forward, not by erasing what had happened, but by learning from it and choosing to move differently. Max blossomed in this environment of honesty and gradual reconciliation. His resilience was nothing short of inspiring. School became a place of achievement and pride. Friendships deepened into bonds that held him steady. He threw himself into his passions, from the thrill of soccer matches to the quiet concentration of painting, and his laughter became the soundtrack of our new life together. Each smile, each small victory, reminded me that even the most shattered hearts could heal with time and care. Financial stability crept back into our lives through meticulous planning and relentless hard work. We leaned on the support of friends, counselors, and professionals who believed in us when we struggled to believe in ourselves. Legal battles were resolved fairly, with Max's best interest always guiding every decision, ensuring that his well-behavior remained our top priority. Looking back, that small town in Italy was more than a backdrop to our story. It was a crucible that tested us and forged a stronger, wiser version of myself. It taught me the power of self-reliance and the importance of community, showing me that true strength comes from embracing both truth and courage, even when the path forward is uncertain. To anyone watching this who feels abandoned, lost, or powerless, know this: you possess a strength you might not yet see. Your voice matters. Your worth is undeniable, and your future holds endless possibilities waiting for you to claim. Share your story in the comments below. Like and subscribe if this journey resonates with you. Remember, sometimes being left stranded isn't the end. It's the first step toward finding your true path. Because survival isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about rising, rebuilding, and reclaiming your life on your own terms.